Hello and welcome back to my garden. Today we are in front of the house here. And originally I had this wonderful idea for this area. My property line runs down towards that telephone pole you see all the way in the background, and my original idea was to fill this space with flowering shrubs. Unfortunately, Mr. and Mrs. Deer and Bambi too had decided that that wasn't such a good idea. The other part of this equation is last year I had purchased some additional land over here. So having these shrubs here makes very little sense. You can also see that these shrubs, looks like a bit of a massacre or a graveyard. The deer continuously come back every winter and they decide to prune my shrubs for me. Now this has been going on for like 4 years, and foolish me, I have just tolerated it. Thinking that something miraculously would change, but no, nothing miraculously has changed. So I'm going to dig up and remove all of these shrubs here. And I'm going to start with the gardenia all the way at the end, and I'm going to talk more about that in a second. What you see up front here is a azalea, I believe. And yeah, the deer have gone to town on all of these shrubs. They defoliate them, they break branches, and they nibble on the branches. Surprisingly though, the shrubs come back every year. And then depending upon the movement of the herd that moves through the area, they may or may not eat these shrubs or attack these shrubs during the summertime, let's say. So I do get some enjoyment out of them, but sadly not as much. And so these don't really serve a purpose here anymore. I'm tired of watching them get eaten and devoured every year by the deer, so we're gonna move them. That's right, we're gonna dig them up and move them over to the rose garden. Let's go look at the gardenia first. And believe it or not, this is a gardenia. You really can't tell because the deer have pretty much decimated this plant, and by doing this every winter and breaking off branches and whatever else damage they do to it, it's really not happy here, and it honestly should be at least twice as tall, but it's not. So what I'm going to do today is dig this plant up, and then we're going to take it over to the vegetable garden, and I'm going to explain to you what the next part of this process is. So the whole area is just crawling right now with fire ants. It's one of the reasons I wear gloves while gardening. So I'm just going to cover this back up and then we'll head over to the veg garden. Okay, so here we are back in the vegetable garden. And for those of you new to the channel, I'm in Eastern North Carolina growing zone 8B. Today is a particularly lovely day. It's going to be about 65, and over the next 10 days it's also going to be very warm. Nighttime temperatures are not supposed to drop anywhere near freezing. So if I was going to transplant anything such as the shrub, I think now would be the time to do it. If you're an experienced gardener and you think I'm wrong, please leave those comments below. Let me know what mistakes I am making. I'm a novice at gardening, but I'm learning as time goes on. But I think now, while the temperatures are still cool, we haven't hit springtime. I can do this now with the warmer temperature right now. It might be, in my brain, I'm thinking this is going to be right now less shock to the plant, less transplant shock. I could have done this theoretically when it was freezing cold out, but I'm thinking about chopping up the roots and doing what I'm about to do to the plant. It would be a little bit more shocking. So with the warmer weather, I'm thinking this might be a good thing. I will make a note here is that if we do go to get freezing temperatures between now and let's say April, because of what I'm doing today, I will move this into the greenhouse so it's better protected and sheltered from any cold temperatures. I'm going to be moving it into the rose garden, and I will show you more, and I'll show you more about that in just a minute. But first, what I want to do is rinse this plant off a bit, because what happened is that the fire ants had started to build a mound up around the plant itself. So they're burying the trunk and they're burying the stems. And I would come by every so often and chase them off of the plant, and I'd put down ant killer. But they would always come back. Let's see here. I'm going to try to remove some of the grasses that are also grown up around it. I never built a bed around these shrubs because the hope is that they would grow out relatively quickly, and they would basically shade out the grasses from around their bases as they got older and bigger. But best laid plans of mice and men. So there's a lot of grass around entangled in the roots here. And try to get some of those out. Get some of that off there. So this is the base of the plant, or the crown, I guess you would call it. Yeah, this is the crown of the shrub. And the fire ants had built up maybe 6 inches above that, and all this was buried in the soil. Okay, so this is looking pretty good right now. I think the next thing I'm going to do is going to be maybe controversial. So if you have comments, please feel free to leave them below. Try not to be so harsh on me. Hopefully I learn from any mistakes I do make if you guys make some good criticisms there. But let me get my pruners. What I have here is a nursery pot. Probably this shrub might have even come in this pot. So I'm going to temporarily put this gardenia into this pot, but unfortunately it does have a bit of a taproot. So I'm going to prune that. But the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prune off some of this top growth. And that is to hopefully try to reduce as much transplant shock as possible. So by me reducing the top growth, theoretically it would give the roots then some time to settle into the temporary pot. Not going to really do too much root pruning. Okay, I think that's going to be enough. Again, I don't want to prune too much because I don't want to set the plant too far back, but I just wanted to take a little bit off. Now let's pot this guy up and try not to get bitten by more fire ants. Despite the washing I'd given it, this plant is still crawling in fire ants. So it must have been a fairly sizable nest built basically right underneath the shrub or into the shrub. Let me finish putting potting soil in, and then we're going to give this a good soak. I'm going to give it a really good soak, and this is to allow a lot of the soil to hopefully settle in around all those roots. And then see if I have to add more soil. Well, there we go. The gardenia is now potted up, and hopefully the fire ants that are in here end up dispersing. But this shrub, if it survives the winter and it starts to put on new growth in the springtime, hopefully in a year's time roughly, I will be putting this in the rose garden. Let me show you where. Okay, here we are in the back of the rose garden, and where I'm standing right here is black covered space with junk on it. This will eventually be a patio, believe it or not, here in the rose garden, and it's in the back corner towards the vegetable garden there. This hot mess right here is basically a giant compost pile. I've been dumping grass clippings, flowers, flower clippings, excess soil, all sorts of stuff here for the last few years. And it's hard to tell on camera, but it is unusual. It's an unusual sort of wedge shape. Now, my plan for this space, as far back as when I drew it out, was to have this as a non-rose space. So the whole back border right here will be filled with trees, shrubs, and maybe some other small flowering plants, but trees and shrubs would make up the bulk of this space. And as you can see, we're nowhere near ready. What'll probably happen is at some point this year, maybe this upcoming fall or winter, I'm going to start covering this up. I'll add more grass clippings and other debris to this. I will then cover this up with black weed fabric and let it rot down for maybe a season, probably a season. The far corner, I don't know if it's in shot, but the far corner I've had covered up since last summer or the summer before, something like that. And we're going to dig into that later in the season because I want to plant out my elderberry tree over there, and I will bring you guys along for that because that's going to be my sort of first experiment into this working compost area thing. So the whole idea, the whole premise was, again, if you're new to the channel or even if you've watched me for a while, was to, instead of bringing in tons of compost, which is quite expensive, literally just making this into a giant compost heap, letting all sorts of stuff just happen in here, let nature do its thing, and as the material rots down, it's going to enrich this native soil underneath it, and it's going to add hopefully, if I add enough debris to it, a bit of a mound, because the back of the rose garden here does flood when we get heavy torrential downpours or tropical storms or hurricanes. So it will flood. If I can raise this ground up just a little bit before planting into it, that means that the plants will get drier feet after a flood quicker. So as the water recedes, the raised areas obviously will be drier quicker first, and that will make the plants happy. So this is my thinking, this is what's going on. So that gardenia, if it does survive in the pot for the, let's say, the next year or so, will eventually move someplace in here. Now there's going to be no rhyme, no reason, no pattern as to what shrubs I put where. It's going to be sort of informal, as it were. So that's what's happening here today in the garden. I just dug up the one shrub. Now I do need to dig up a crepe myrtle and 2 or 3 other azalea bushes. If you guys think I should prune them back more to reduce transplant shock, please leave those comments below. If you guys think I shouldn't be moving them now and wait until they start putting on growth, let me know in the comments, but let me know your thoughts. From my understanding is that you want to kind of do this kind of thing when the temperature is cool, and that good soak that I gave it, if we had freezing temperatures, that would only freeze that root ball, which is only going to create more transplant shock. So that's why I wanted to do it now, while the next 10 days or so are going to be mild. And as I mentioned earlier, if we do get some freezing temperatures in the next, let's say 15 or 20 days, or even the next 30 days before springtime comes, I will roll that guy right into the greenhouse to keep it as well protected as possible. Trying to give these plants the best chance as possible, moving them from someplace where they're not working anymore to hopefully someplace where they will work in the future. If you haven't checked out all the links below, please check out those links below. If you haven't left a comment, please leave a comment. If you haven't given this video a thumbs up, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Tell your friends, families, loved ones, grumpy old guy across the street about this channel. And I will catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.